Alright gamers, it's your boy Waffles back at it again with another video. So, I went shopping today and I got some clothes for the conference because I realized that I don't want to look like a hobo because fucking this dude from the Linux Foundation was like, oh, by the way, if you're coming, you get a free fucking 45-minute interview so that we can pitch joining the Linux Foundation to you. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm not really in a position to sign Gentoo Linux up for anything, but I will relay all this information to them because I'm sure you can make a fucking deal for a project that probably doesn't make much money, you know? So, anyways, I'm gonna bother fucking Imolo about that later. I pinged him already and I'm like, hey, what the fuck should I tell him? Because I'm not a good representative for this project, obviously, but whatever, they sent me. So, I mean, they didn't send me, I volunteered myself, but you know what I mean. Anyways, I was going to talk a bit today about Winamp. Nothing about the current drama, though. So, even though they did close their repository for right now, they privated it because it turns out Winamp had a ton of proprietary code in it that did not belong to them. Like 1.5 gigs of the 1.7 gigs total was like Intel IPP. So like most of the code wasn't even theirs. And I always make this joke, Winamp is dead again. Long live Audacious, right? Because Audacious is like a Winamp clone, kind of like XMMS. And but it's built from the ground up to be open source, And what we're finding out with these proprietary programs, especially like if you've looked at the Windows XP source code, there's so much proprietary shit that goes into that, as well as some open source code. Like they had some GNU code in there, and they actually use it still in like new Windows too. But Winamp, because it's a proprietary program first and foremost, it's got a lot of proprietary shit in it. And because of that, even when you open source it, because people think, oh, if they just open source, then we can preserve all this. Well, you can't because the licenses are different. And when you're developing open source programs, you can mix licenses all you want because, like, I've got the only e-build I've ever made was for Blanket, and Blanket had a bunch of sounds that were all licensed under various, like, royalty-free licenses. Sorry about that, I'm slurping on a drink. But because Winamp was designed from the ground up to be proprietary, they don't have to worry about the license of the for like contributors, because it's all done internally at the company. So because of that, I don't see a reason to open source a lot of these proprietary programs unless they are like strictly, they don't depend on a whole lot of proprietary stuff. Like, would Windows Notepad be cool open source? Yeah, probably. That would be cool. But something, something like a video player or something, or, I mean, it's hard to come up with examples off the top of my head. But yeah, like these proprietary programs, there's no benefit to open sourcing them because even if you do, you still can't contribute to them because you can't build it without all this proprietary bullshit. So all of this has to be rewritten from scratch. And that would be a cool project to make open source Winamp, but guess what? We already have it. We have 2 copies of that, actually. We got XMMS and we got Audacious. So, like, the work's already been done. What are you going to do differently by using the actual Winamp Win32 source code, and, like, what would that help you port it to Linux anyways? It just wouldn't, you're running a lot of garbage, proprietary, old school Windows specific code, and we've already got better options. We already rebuilt it from the ground up with an open source mindset, and that makes your life a lot easier when you're not having to deal with rewriting a bunch of crap and making it compatible with other crap, So while it's cool that they tried to open source it and like preserve the source code of this program, it also just, why, it doesn't really matter because even though it's open source, you still got to do so much work and you're basically going to have to rewrite the whole thing at the end of the day. So it just doesn't make sense, but that's just me. It's kind of a different way of thinking about open sourcing things because with proprietary software, there's just no reason to go open source unless you're like in that specific use case where you can actually make it a fully open source program. Stuff like what was that cartoon thing that Futurama used, Tunes or something? Anyways, they managed to go open source. I think Blender was proprietary at first. They went open source. I can't remember. There's programs that have done it, but you have to put in the work. You got to put in the effort, and it doesn't make much sense for Winamp because they relied so much on these third-party external programs in order to do their stuff. So what do you do? And that's really all I had to say. Thanks.